welcome to this week's weekly recap for the NPL Majors Division. Once again, I am on my own. I apologize. I'm not going to make any excuse or anything for that. That's entirely my fault. I've been really busy this week and just I barely found the time to make this, so couldn't really coordinate my time zones with either Dave or Matty, so we'll see them next week, I'm sure. Right, so let's not waste any more time just on me. Let's just hop right into the games this week, starting off with our first game between the Toronto Staraptors and the Portland Timbers. So, Jolt and his Toronto Staraptors are on the near side, and Togovois and his Portland Timbers are on the other side. And straight away from team matchup, I feel like this is a really balanced game here. I feel like both teams have ways of getting around the other, which is always nice. And I think that it largely comes down to if they've prepared any good surprise lures. For example, HP Fire on the Jirachi for potential scissor switching, as an example, or Icy Wind perhaps for the Garchomp. And also just how well they play. And that's what I like to see in these matches. And spoiler alert, this game was Game of the Week. So it's a treat, and let's just jump right into it. So we see Jolt lead off with his Breloom as he spores the Garchomp, and from the reaction Togovois has in the chat, which you can't see, it is definitely a Choice Scarf Breloom, but it wakes up turn 1 and gets off an Earthquake on the incoming Heliolisk. Now, Jolt gets a little bit of revenge for that because he gets 5 hits with Bullet Seed, including a couple of potentially high rolls that meant that it was not a high chance for Garchomp to die on that turn. So we do see Gardevoir come in on the Tentacruel after Sizzle came in on the Breloom, and I'm just going to slow this down a little bit. And Sizzle goes for Pursuit on the Jirachi, just getting off a bit of damage on it, and then switches out into his Zapdos on the incoming Talonflame, who burns the Zapdos, causing it to have a little bit more residual damage the entire game. Now, obviously, the Talonflame does not want to take hits from the Zapdos, as it just Volt Switches out of the Mega Latios, and Mega Latios takes nothing from it, sets up a substitute on the Sizzle's U-turn, as Togovois goes out into his Mega Gardevoir. Now, this is not something that can be substituted on, so Jolt goes for the Shadow Ball, doing a clean 44%, as the Gardevoir just kills the Mega Latios with Hyper Voice. So Jirachi comes in on the Mega Gardevoir switches out into Zapdos, which is his physically defensive wall, even if it is burnt, as Jirachi tricks it a Choice Band. Very nice prediction on his part, predicting the switch, because if he'd stayed in to lose the Gardevoir there, then the Jirachi was basically dead, because it would have been forced out into anything else which he could just freely Psyshock on. But he doesn't, and Nidoqueen does come in on the Jirachi, sets up Stealth Rock on the switch into Tentacruel, and Earth Powers, breaking its Sugar Berry as the Tentacruel surfs, and then the Tentacruel goes for Rapid Spin, predicting a switch out, but the Nidoqueen just goes straight for another Earth Power to kill the Tentacruel. Now at this point Talonflame comes out and Brave Birds the Nidoqueen, and that was a roll, by the way. It was about a 50-50 roll, but it might come into handy. And so the Cresselia comes in on the Talonflame and pivots into Zapdos. It wants to see what the Zapdos can do to it. And don't forget, this Zapdos has been tricked a Choice Band, so it goes for Volt Switch and does nothing to that Talonflame. We see that actually, if the Talonflame doesn't roost, it still only does about 50%. 50%, my apologies for hearing me sneeze. As he sacks off his Breloom, knowing that it's the least useful thing, and he was probably thinking that Toad would go for Shadow Ball there if he had it. And then the Jirachi comes in and just goes for Iron Head on the incoming Cresselia. Now, this part is a little bit long, but Jirachi basically stays in on Cresselia for a few turns, just flinching it and being annoying, etc, etc. We all know what Jirachis do. And then, I believe it was in 3 turns' time. I will just turn this onto fast for a couple of moments then. I believe it was here, yes. Jolt switches into his Talonflame on a Calm Mind, and Togewa later revealed that he was thinking about going for Toxic on that turn, as the Cresselia gets taunted by the Talonflame. Talonflame goes for Roost, knowing that it can take any hits from that Cresselia without any real trouble. Goes for Taunt on the Zapdos in case it tried to go for Roost or Defog, but it is Choice Band, so can't really do all that much. Wait, what? When did he lose the Choice Band? I could have sworn that he was tricked to Choice Band. I am confused. But, oh well, we do see the Talonflame kill the Gardevoir, and Talonflame goes for Taunt again on the Cresselia. He doesn't manage to get the Spadef drop or anything, and now this turns into a long while, and I actually did write the turn down, so we're just going to go to turn 42, as the Cresselia is in the middle of being 1v1'd by the Talonflame, as the Talonflame is going to be back up at around 50% at the end of this, and here we see the Cresselia go down. I didn't want to waste just 10 turns where I couldn't talk about anything. So in comes the Scizor, as Talonflame goes for Will-O-Wisp. The Scizor goes for Hidden Power. It is not Hidden Power Rock, as the Talonflame roosts off the damage, and Scizor Bull Punched, trying to hope that he was faster for whatever reason, and Hidden Powers on the Will-O-Wisp, and at this point it is basically just Jolt's game unless he can manage to get a quadruple crit or something. Not very likely, in other words. And knowing that, Jolt just switches out to make it even less likely, and at this point there is no coming back for Togevoir, so he goes for Pursuit, and and here he actually goes for U-turn, just denying Jolt the extra differential point on his Pokemon and sacking both of his Pokemon to Stealth Rock. So, all in all, I think that was a good game. There were a few rolls in there. The Nidoqueen one I mentioned was about 50-50, so, yeah, and the Gardevoir was one where he claimed he got rolled on, which is a possibility, but Gardevoir is very frail physically. And yeah, I think it was a really good game, though. I think that there was no real instances of hacks. It was just 2 really good players playing really well against each other. No, I take that back. There was a little bit of hacks turn 2 when the Garchomp woke up early, but that was immediately counteracted by turn 3, 5 hits on the Garchomp, including rolls. So, what are you going to do about it? So, yes, that was a very good first game by Jolt and Togevoir, resulting in a 2-0 victory for the Toronto Staraptors. So now let's move on to our next game between the Montreal Cobalions and the Colorado Avalugs. And the Colorado Avalugs are on the near side, with the Montreal Cobalions on the far side. They used to be able to switch sides on the replays, but you can't anymore. I don't know why that is. So, immediately at team matchup, I feel more of a connection to the team brought by the Colorado Avalugs, Foghorn. I just really do think that Hooper and Altaria and Mew are all really, really, really good. But at the same time, I have used Nidoking. Keldeo is fantastic. Weavile is, I think, my second favourite Mon ever, after Mawile. So that's another thing to consider. It's actually my avatar on the Poke Community Center. So, yes. And I just generally like the way his team looks. One thing I do not like about it, however, is how weak his team is to the combination of Weavile and Nidoking. because his only real check for Weavile, and I'm not saying that Rotom W is not a check in my book, by the way. His only real check for it is the keys, and Nidoking is basically a Klefki counter, so not that much he can do with that, unfortunately. But he definitely does have ways of winning. A potential stuff like especially offensive Altaria with perhaps agility looks to be really, really good in this matchup. But at the same time, he is really weak to that Weavile and that Nidoking. So let's just jump into the game, see how it goes. He leads off with Mew, as Dave leads off with his Ferrothorn, and the Mew goes for Will-O-Wisp on the incoming Mandibuzz switch, as the Mandibuzz doubles into Nidoking, nicely predicting the Klefki switch, as the Nidoking can just fire off a Flamethrower. Now, at that point, Nidoking could probably 2-hit KO the Mew, but he probably didn't want to risk it, as the Rotom W comes in on the Mandibuzz and goes for Hydro Pump, predicting a switch into the aforementioned Nidoking. Now, he goes for Hydro Pump again on the switch out into Ferrothorn, as the Ferrothorn just takes this opportunity to set up a Leech Seed, hoping to start whittling away at his team, and we see that the Klefki does not have leftovers. That leads me to believe it is a dual screen set of some sort, as the Nidoking doubles in on the incoming Landorus T, as it goes for U-turn on the Mandibuzz, just successfully getting extra chip damage on it. And now we see the Altaria go for Cotton Guard, which means that it is not, in fact, a specially offensive Altaria, as I was hoping. But he does have a Nidoking. Specially offensive Altaria isn't great versus that, and I could see a potential Cotton Guard DD set working. So he goes out into Klefki, sets spikes, and where was the leftovers earlier? I could have sworn there wasn't any. I'm not good. This isn't going to be the best recap of the week. I do apologize about that already. I know it's not going to be the best. I'm sorry. So he Volt switches out to Mandibuzz, as the Mandibuzz roosts off the damage pretty much, and the Landorus T goes for Stone Edge, as the Mandibuzz manages to get off a Defog, and here he has to risk the Stone Edge, but Dave switches out into his Keldeo, making a very nice decision there, and he can just fire off a really free substitute here. I was going to say Scold, but then I remembered it was substitute, as the animation for substitute started. He fires off a Scold, gets the burn, but Synchronize burns through substitute, and the Keldeo gets burnt for all of its troubles of setting up a substitute to avoid getting burnt, as it just fires off Scalds repeatedly. It doesn't get the burn on the Rotom W, but, I mean, what are you going to do? As he switches out into his Ferrothorn on the Volt Switch, just to try and start pressuring him again and more. So at this point, he can just go straight for his Leech Seed on the Mew, just whistle away at it even more. The Leech Seed plus burn damage basically mean that roosting is unviable, and then he just sets up his Stealth Rock, extra chip damage for everything switching around, and he's basically always going to be at about 88% with the potential for the Leech Seed recovery offsetting the burn, as he then goes for Pursuit as the Mew switches out. It was a bit of a 50-50 there if he stayed in and knocked off, or if he switched out and pursuited, but oh well. And the Klefki comes in, goes for T-Wave on the incoming Nidoking, and this is exactly why I said I didn't like the fact that he was using both Klefki, and he was only using Klefki to cover Weavile when the Nidoking is just such a hard Klefki counter, as the Nidoking does manage to kill the Rotom W with a Flamethrower plus a Sludge Wave. Landorus T comes in as Fog goes for Stone Edge on the incoming Mandibuzz, just killing it, not giving it the opportunity to roost, as now he believes that this is a Scarf Landorus, so he switches out his he switches into his Nidoking and then out into his Ferrothorn. That also means that he can Scout, but the fact that he did switch out of the Landorus does imply that it is Choice Scarf, as he stays in on a potential Fire Punch and manages to Thunder Wave the Hooper. And It even manages to get off a nice 15% on the incoming Klefki and sets up Leech Seed on it. The Rocky Helmet is coming a little bit out of hand now because he's not managing to recover any more than he's doing, as he goes out into Nidoking predicting potential T-Wave or Foul Play, but he's back up at full HP now as the Klefki sets up a layer of spikes and just dies to the Nidoking's Flamethrower. Now, Landorus T comes in here, and there is no more ground immunity, so he can feel free to just switch out into his Ferrothorn, just sack it off, and the Landorus T doesn't have that great of a time. He goes out into his Weavile and just clicks Ice Shard, knowing that whatever comes out, he can just kill that again, and Weavile basically cleans up the game at this point, unless he misses, which he does not. He manages to actually get, a crit on the Gardevoir, and in comes the Hooper, which is paralyzed and dies to a knockoff anyway. So, yes, that was a good game, in my opinion, between Dave and Fog. Though I don't remember any particular instances of hacks that I thought were particularly damning on either player. It was largely just a matter of Dave playing really well, doubling out of Nidoking on the switch, predicting potential for the Landorus to be bluffing a Choice Scarf and being able to find out if he was Choice Scarf at the same time. The way he played around the Mew was pretty good in my opinion, and the way he played around the Hooper was also pretty good. I just think he played a really good game there, and deserves credit for it. And it's not to say that Fog played bad, Dave just played better, as is wont to happen. But as I did say at the beginning of the match, the lack of Weavile answers on the team did come back to haunt him, because Klefki isn't really solid enough, in my personal opinion. Not when you know your opponent has a Nidoking or something like an Steel Ground, the Drill, Sandrush, I've completely blanked. Excadrill. If your opponent has something like an Excadrill or a Nidoking or a Nidoqueen for that matter, and you know that you've got to have a Weavile counterplay, I just feel like you can't just rely on something that gets completely countered, 100% countered by one of your opponent's mons. But regardless, that was a good game there, and now it's his time to move on to our next game between the San Antonio Swamperts and the Phoenix Sunkern. Phoenix Sunkern, coached by Cheeseboy628, are on the near side, and the San Antonio Swamperts, coached by Dallas Boy, and there's numbers there as well, are on the far side. Now, immediately at this matchup, I can tell this is going to be a fun one to commentate because it's going to be mercifully quick. The hardest type of match to commentate are the ones where you've got to be keeping on talking for 80, 90, 100 turns. Ugh, no. Whereas on this one, you see Alakazam, you see Landorus I, you see Electros, you see Metagross, you see, well, let's ignore the Skarmory momentarily, and you see Heatran. And on the opposing side, you see Magnezone, you see the ultimate breaker. There is nothing stronger than this in terms of just outright power that is currently allowed in normal play. In the Mega Medicham, the threatening Gengar, the Bishop, and just but in terms of who has a little bit of an advantage, I think it comes down to sets largely. For example, if this is a potential Rock Polish Diancie with Timid, it could speed tie with the Alakazam. No, it can't. It can actually outspeed the Alakazam slightly. I think. I'm pretty sure it can. No, 218 times 2. No, it can't quite speed tie with the Mega Alakazam, but it can outspeed everything else on the team and can potentially do damage. But if it's just a normal defensive set, then it can't obviously do that. Also, if this is like Sash Gengar, it will be more effective than Life Orb Gengar. If this is Sucker Punch Pursuit or something. This Bishop puts in more work. It really does come down to set details here, and I can't really predict the winner. So we see Gengar lead off against Electros as the Gengar goes for Destiny Bond turn 1, as Electros goes for knocks off the Life Orb, and narrowly avoids killing Gengar, so he can save his Electros for a later date. He goes for Destiny Bond on the incoming Metagross, and they both double down. Now, I'm just going to pause here momentarily. On the sheet at the end of this, I have put this down as a kill for Gengar and a kill for Metagross, with both of them dying. Let me know if that's wrong. I don't know how Destiny Bond mechanics work, if it should just be Metagross that gets the kill, or if Gengar shouldn't get the kill at all, or whatever, but I do feel like that is the way it's meant to go. So at this point, it is just it's not 6 anyone, it's 5-5, just basically a new game with only 5 mons. Medicham comes in on the Electros and it can just fire off an attack here. He goes for the fake out, just getting extra chip damage off, and then high jump kicks the Skarmory and does 75% to the most physically defensive mon there is. Skarmory then goes for Protect, but Cheese Boy scouts that out nicely and goes for Ice Punch, as he then switches out into Heatran. The way he's brought this in implies it's going to be a Scarf Heatran, and Cheese does not want to risk a potential burn, so he switches out into his Diancie, which takes nothing from that. Upon this point, he can just set up a Stealth Rock if he wanted to, or go for Earth Power. He actually goes for the Diamond Storm, predicting it nicely. Landorus comes in on Diancie, and Diancie goes for the Hidden Power Ice, as shown by the Yachi Berry. But the Landorus can then just fire off an Earthquake, and at this point the Magneton is basically useless. Everything on the opponent team deals with it, so he can just feel free to sack that off. Medicham comes in, goes for a Fake Out, and he knows that Bullet Punch is the exact same role as Fake Out, so he is guaranteed a kill there. And then Alakazam comes in as the Mega Medicham switches out into his Bishop, as the Alakazam goes for Substitute. Now Bishop just goes for Sucker Punch immediately here. He doesn't want to play around with this threat, as the Alakazam can then go for Focus Blast. And then Medicham can just come in, go for Fake Out, the whole routine. But he actually makes a very nice prediction, goes straight for High Jump Kick, knowing that he's not likely to switch out there. The Alakazam goes for Substitute, and the Mega Medicham goes for Ice Punch, breaking the Substitute, as the Alakazam then goes for Shadow Ball, killing the Medicham, as Medicham manages to get off 40% on the Alakazam by virtue of Bullet Punch. And then Diancie just manages to get off an Earth Power, and the Heatran cannot win this, so it goes for Lava Plume, it doesn't get a burn or anything, and Earth Power just kills the Heatran. So that was a really good game. I think that might be Assault Vest Diancie, just based on the damage it took from the Heatran. And the Mega Alakazam, of course. But yeah, that was just a really good game between two really good competitors. Diancie just cleaning up the game, but that was just hyper offense versus hyper offense, and the ballsiness of Cheese Boy staying in on the Substitute, going for Ice Punch to break it, and then going for Bullet Punch. That ended up winning him the game. And if Dallas had gone for Shadow Ball that turn, he would have completely lost. There wasn't much chance of it happening. It was definitely the right play, but the guts of pulling that move off are certainly worth commending, at least in my opinion. So, yep, a very good game between two very good competitors, and no hacks worth speaking about at all. Like, Knockoff was a roll, but I mean, the Metagross wouldn't have done anything anyway, and the Electros didn't do anything for the rest of the game anyway, but like, it doesn't matter then. So, with that in mind, let's move on to our next game between... Why do I have two of the same replay open? Trev the King and Richard Arison, coach of the Atlanta Braviaries versus the Oakland Rosa Raiders, which is, I think this is the first time, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Oakland have not brought Roserade. I seem to remember using it as my identifying point in their teams every single week, because I am terrible with names and I can't remember who coaches who very well. I actually have them on notes so that I can't forget them, but I don't like looking at notes. So immediately we see Trev bringing A similar looking team to ones he has brought in weeks past, with just Blissey and then threat. And Richard has counteracted this by bringing Mega Lopunny, which is nothing if not a very good anti-offense mon. And the likes of Sableye, Mamoswine are all heavy threats. Nothing likes dealing with that. For example, if you look at Trev's team and count the Mamoswine switch-ins, your task is very short. There are none. But let's just get into the game then. As we see Blissey lead off against Mamoswine. Mamoswine sets up Stealth Rock in Blissey's face as it gets toxic for its trouble. And then Sableye switches in on the Blissey, going for Stealth Rock itself. And Sableye goes for Taunt as Blissey goes for Protect. And then the Sableye goes for Knockoff as Blissey manages to get a Toxic off on the Sableye. Now that's pretty big because this Sableye was going to be the countermeasure for the Reuniclus and potentially as well the Doublade on Richard's team. So Lopunny comes in on the Emboar and goes straight for Fake Out on the incoming Reuniclus. It looks really defensive. That doesn't look like it can Turk here with Return. As the Jelly Belly just goes for Signal Beam on the incoming Sableye. Now, Sableye here goes straight for Taunt on the incoming Emboar, as he just decides, okay, the Sableye isn't doing anything for the rest of the game. Let's just sack it and try and get a lot of recoil off on the Emboar. As he does do just that, he manages to also get the Toxic off on the Emboar. Doesn't do that much, but oh well. As the Lopunny comes in on the Emboar and goes straight for Drain Punch, and it is a narrow roll and he doesn't get it. As Wild Charge kills the Emboar itself, and that counts as a suicide, I believe, so no one on Richard's team got the kill there. And the Lopunny is now immensely damaged. Magneton comes in on the Reuniclus because obviously he has lost his initial switch-in, being that Sableye. He gets crit by Signal Beam, showing that that is definitely not a Eviolite Magneton, because Eviolite takes a lot less, as he just keeps on firing off flash cannons as the Reuniclus just keeps on setting up Calm Mind and recovering when it has the opportunity to. And I really should have made a note of when this ended, so sorry. But this just keeps on happening. He gets a little bit lucky continuously, just getting Flash Cannon special defense drops, but it's always a little unlucky at the same time because it's not ever in the range where it could be 2-hit KO'd. As the Zoroark comes in, goes straight for Knockoff on the Jelly Belly as it goes for Recover, just scouting off, see what it can do. And then he goes for Sucker Punch and predicts that nicely, and the Reuniclus goes for Signal Beam on the Zoroark and kills it. But at this point, Magneton can come in and just go for Volt switch back out into Vaporeon. Now, Vaporeon versus Togekiss is a definite advantage in the favour of Togekiss, as it sets up a nasty plot. He doesn't want to take a potential Volt Switch or a potential Flash Cannon here. So we see Richard go for Thunderbolt. I think Volt Switch would have been better there, but oh well. As Vaporeon comes in on the Blissey, and he doesn't want the Blissey getting up back to full health, so he just roars it out. It doesn't care what gets the wish so long as it isn't Blissey. So in comes the Greninja as the Vaporeon just goes for Wish and manages to get back up to 74%. It's trying to burn the Greninja. It doesn't have much luck, but he isn't going to lose this 1v1. The Greninja knows this and switches out immediately as the Blissey comes in and takes additional Stealth Rock damage going for Wish. Now, this turn, I thought that was a bit risky, but I thought that there was a potential for Blissey to try and come in there, and he could have gone for Roar, but if he did, he had a risk of knocking him into Blissey anyway. So Lopunny comes in, goes for Drain Punch on the Blade, gets back up to a good amount of health, and he gets paralyzed, as that mattered because we saw Drain Punch did enough to recover him to where Gyrable wouldn't kill him, so he could have 1v1'd the Doublade that way, and instead Doublade gets 2 kills. So the Mamoswine comes in now and goes straight for a Icicle Spear, predicting a potential switch out into Togekiss, and not wanting to waste any turns if it doesn't have to. As the Greninja comes in, as it goes for Night Slash on the Mamoswine. Mamoswine just goes straight for the Earthquake, however, and then Doublade comes in. No, it doesn't. And then Togekiss comes in and switches out into Doublade. The Mamoswine goes for Icicle Spear again, but it doesn't kill the Doublade. And at this point, the Doublade can just really safely kill the Mamoswine by going for Shadow Sneak. Vaporeon comes in, but it is just a free switch into Togekiss, and Togekiss ends up winning the 1v1 after nasty plotting and flinching once, I believe. So, yes, that was a good game, and I think that was a really well played game by Trev. I don't think there were any particular points of misplay. It was just a small matter of the hacks was unfortunate for Richards. If the Drain Punch not hit, but if he didn't get paralyzed on the Drain Punch turn against the Doublade, it could had very limited switching opportunities, and he could probably he had a much better chance of winning. And just like it was unfortunate to see that happen. I understand exactly why he switched out into Lopunny there. Because if he did switch out into Blissey trying to gain extra health back, he could have Drain Punched very freely, and everything would have been 2-hit KO'd by Drain Punch plus Return. And then if something like Doublade came in, he could go for Drain Punch, he could go for High Jump Kick if he had it, but I don't think he did, and get a lot of health back that way. And yeah, if that play worked out, it would have been really, really good for him. It was unfortunate that it didn't, but oh well, you can't... My computer's saying that's enough. It's unfortunate that that happens sometimes, unfortunately. Because I'm not redundant enough by saying it once, I'll say it twice. So, yes, that was unfortunate that it had to happen, but anyway. Let's move on now to the game between the Washington Charizards and the New York Metangs. The Washington Charizards are, of course, coached by Nixon on the near side, while the New York Metangs are coached by Razor, aka Taft, on the other side. I hate listening to myself this much. So, we immediately see a Regigigas, and everyone is lying if they don't say that their immediate eye goes to Regigigas being on the field, because that is something I never thought I would ever see brought to a game. And on the other side, Nixon has some threatening breakers and looks to have a pretty decent matchup overall. He has the Tornadus for Venusaur, he has Tangrowth for Alligator, the Haxorus is looking like a threat, however, and he needs to play carefully around that, but he's probably got Ice Beam on a couple of Mons just to help check it a bit better, and the Tangrowth can live a hit. The Thunderous T is, again, a bit of a problem, but he does have Goodra, which can also help with Victini. And let's just get into the game, as he actually leads off with the Tornadus T, goes for Volt Switch on the Wakan Berry Slowking, as Nidoking comes in, takes a Psychic to the face, and then just sets up a Substitute. On the Toxic, he goes for Thunder Wave on the Slowking as it gets fully paralyzed. It can't break the sub, which it might have done because we did see the roll from Psychic being about 25%. The crit definitely does break the sub, but not really much you can do about that. As he goes for Substitute again on the switching to Crobat, which has got Infiltrator. So it can go for Brave Bird and do nice 46%, however it is crippled by the Thunder Wave, and then it is outsped by the Regigigas, which can just proceed to mess up its life with the return. Now, the reason that Thunder Wave was the right opportunity there was the fact that he could get an extra turn of Leftovers Recovery, and if there was an unexpected amount of bulk, for example, it wouldn't be crippling. So he goes for return again on the Tangrowth, as the Tangrowth actually goes for Rock Tomb there. I thought that was rather risky. He was obviously predicting the switch, but if he went for Substitute there, the Rock Tomb wouldn't have broken it at all. And yeah, that's risky. So Regigigas, he just looks to be on a rampage with Regigigas, just trying to kill everything with the Regigigas and not caring about what he gets in its way to do so. As he doesn't manage to get another kill, but he manages to get off a good chunk of damage on both the Tangrowth and the Slowking, which means that he can just go straight out into Haxorus, set up a Substitute, because we've seen that the Slowking does have Thunder Wave and Toxic already, and then he can set up a Swords Dance as the Psychic breaks the Substitute, and he can also set up a Dragon Dance, knowing that he can live any one attack, and it's not likely that he's going to go for Thunder Wave, as he goes for Psychic, and then he can just go for Outrage, because Nixon does not have a Fairy on his team. And yes, this is mono attacking dragon, just like Gen 5. But this is a +3 Haxorus with Lumberry to cure its Outrage confusion. So that's not losing. At this point in the game, it can just OHKO everything with Outrage, as it proceeds to do just that. And yeah, that was a much quicker battle than I was expecting. And Regigigas showed the value of underappreciated mons in this type of format, getting surprise kill on it and weakening the Slowking and paralyzing a bunch of things to just pave the way for a Dragon Dance sweep by either Haxorus or for Alligator, or potentially an Agility sweep by the likes of the Thunderous Tarian. I think that was a really good display by Taft of really good preparation. He knew what would beat his opponent's team, and he brought it and executed it pretty much perfectly. Yeah, I have no complaints with the way that game went at all. And if you excuse me for one moment. Okay, I'm back, and I have no idea what I was saying before I had to go and take that call. So, let's just move on to the final game of this week between Manaphy City and St. Louis Reshiram, coached by Cam and Matty respectively. They're on the respective sides. I said their names in. So, well, you can see their logos, so you know who's who. So, Manaphy City have brought Pinsir, Gothitelle, Starmie, Rotom Mow, Sylveon, and Hydreigon, whereas Matty has brought Mega Gyarados, Salamence, Tyranitar, Bronzong, Infernape, and Azelf. Now, this is looking to be an interesting game, and one that I think, just from the look of this, I would say that Matty has a slight edge in. Because he does have the Tyranitar, he has, for the Gothitelle, he has Bronzong, which can deal with the Rotom and the Sylveon rather well. Mega Gyarados looks to just sweep at +1, although finding room to get to +1 is going to be hard. Pardon me. The Salamence looks to have a favourable matchup, and the Infernape obviously caters its set to the opposing team to have no switch-ins. So, let's just get into the game then, as we see Sylveon lead versus an Azelf lead. The Azelf just goes straight for U-turn and goes into Bronzong here on the the Wish from the Sylveon, as it goes for Hyper Voice, just scouting out the damage from Bronzong, as Bronzong gets a Toxic off, knowing that the likelihood of Gyro Ball killing is not very high. He goes for Stealth Rock on Gothitelle, and then Hydreigon switches in as Bronzong attempts to go for Toxic, and that was a really nice play in my opinion on Manaphy City's part, because he doesn't know if it's Shed Shell, but he does manage to catch him on the double the next time as the Tyranitar goes for Pursuit on the Gothitelle. So that is a dead Gothitelle. Rotom comes in as it goes for Volt Switch on the Salamence, and we see that is probably a pretty spadef Salamence to take that relatively little from a Volt Switch. but no matter how Spadef it isn't living anything from a Sylveon. As the Sylveon can just fire off 3 Hyper Voices, it's not doing much to the Bronzong, as we don't see the Bronzong's item, which did leave Manaphy City to believe it was Shed Shell, explaining that double earlier, as Starmie comes in on a Gyro Ball from the Bronzong and goes for Rapid Spin, as Bronzong just Gyro Balls again, and Starmie recovers, as the Bronzong goes for their Stealth Rock again. Now Starmie goes for Scold here, as he misses another Toxic. This is actually the second Toxic he's missed already. And then he goes into a Zelf, and Starmie doesn't want to take an Explosion or any other potential super effective coverage move that this Zelf might have, as it just goes for the U-turn, which Starmie could have lived, by the way, as Tyranitar comes in on the Sylveon and doubles into Bronzong again. He just wants the extra chip damage from Sand on the Sylveon to help wear it down even more. And he doesn't want to switch into a Starmie because after Sand and Stealth Rock, then the Gyro Ball would have a good chance to KO. As it comes in and just kills the Bronzong with a Scald. So in comes the Mega Gyarados on the Starmie and sets up a substitute as the Starmie goes for Thunder Wave on it and paralyzes it and basically cripples it for the entire game. As the Starmie manages to get off a free Rapid Spin. I think Crunching was the better play there because Dragon Dance, you're not going to do too much extra with that. He goes for Waterfall on the incoming Rotom as the Rotom goes for Thunderbolt. He gets fully paralyzed, and then the Gyarados goes down to the Rotom Mo. So in comes a Zelf as it goes straight for U-turn, narrowly missing out on the KO against the Rotom as he can go out into Tyranitar as the Rotom Volt switches, revealing it is not choiced. Which up until this point I had thought, and I believe Matty had probably thought as well. So he goes for Superpower on the Hydreigon, as Hydreigon can go for its own Superpower and show why it is the better pseudo-legendary, as it just kills the Tyranitar dead. Infernape comes in at this point, and he obviously doesn't want to deal with the fact that his Hydreigon could die, and he knows he can just switch out into his 1% Rotom, and it's not doing anything for the rest of the game anyway, and then he can just go out into his Pinsir and click Quick Attack to kill the Infernape. So at this point, the advantage is rather heavily in Manaphy City's favour. Salamence comes in on the return, tanks it barely, and goes for Wish, as he then goes for Toxic on the incoming Starmie, knowing that he's not likely to stay in with his Pinsir and waste his return PP. As he goes for Wish again on the Thunder Wave, he knows that the Starmie probably doesn't have Ice Beam, considering the fact that it is Thunder Wave, it's Recover, Rapid Spin, and Scald. Its entire moveset has been shown. He knows that it's not Ice Beam actually, so I was wrong. As we see the Salamence continuously going for Wish, and it now switches out into a Zelf, trying to get the extra bulk back on a Zelf, as it manages to get it back up to 82%. And Starmie goes down to the Toxic from the Salamence, as Salamence switches in on the Hydreigon, and at this point it is basically all over. He switches out into a Zelf again just in case, but no, the Draco Meteor just kills the Zelf, and Hydreigon is in versus Salamence. He obviously doesn't want to risk missing potentially, so he switches out into Scizor. He also wants to save his differential as well, as he goes straight for Return on the Wish, and then he just Swords Dances on the Protect. He gets paralyzed, but it doesn't matter because the result is the same anyway, as a +2 Return is enough to kill a Salamence. There was Protect stalling, and there was hope for a moment if he could get multiple of them and a miss on Draco Meteor, but didn't work, as Manaphy City does manage to pick up the win, the 2-0 win against the St. Louis Reshiram, and that was once again a good game in my opinion. I did feel there were a couple of slight misplays on Matty's part, and those were the ones that cost him the game. The Gyarados trying to set up on the Starmie, I wasn't a fan of that particularly. And not going for Crunch, but going for Dragon Dance instead. I feel like Crunch was just undoubtedly the superior option. But then again, Dragon Dance could have picked up a kill if he not gotten paralyzed on the Rotom. It's all swings and roundabouts, really, when you consider the effect that the Thunder Wave's had on the game, because Thunder Wave is a lovely move. And yeah, I don't really think there's that much to say about this. This was just a good game between two good players. Matty had the advantage in the early game, but the threat of Mega Pinsir and the usefulness of Thunderwave Starmie brought it back for Manaphy City and made it in their favour. So I do hope that you have enjoyed this week's weekly recap. I apologise, it is not as good as it should be, just due to me being in a rush and somewhat sick with a cold, and the fact that there is no one here with me. But I hope that you will forgive me for that, and I hope you all have a very nice day indeed. Bye bye.